Here's a hot take for you to start the show. Last season, the Sacramento Kings made a lot of mistakes. Yeah, I know. Crazy, right? That's why they pay me the big bucks. But in all seriousness, it's not just last season's Kings team, it's the last 16 years this Kings organization has consistently made the same mistakes over and over and over again that this new Kings team needs to learn from and correct in order to accomplish their goal of making the playoffs. And here to talk about the lessons that need to be learned, I'm going to be joined by my friend from the Return of the Roar podcast and SacTown Sports 1140 Radio. Chris Watkins joins me right here on the Locked On Kings podcast.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all regular season and, of course, all off-season. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports reporter and producer at ABC 10 News here in the California capital. And with the excitement, with the impatience of this upcoming season, the hope that this can finally be the team to end the playoff drought. We've had that hope before. We've had those expectations before, only to get our hearts broken. And maddeningly, what happens is the Kings make the same mistakes. We see different players, different coaches, different front office staff, same issues that have plagued this team for the better part of 2 decades. They need to learn these lessons. Someone needs to teach them these lessons. Somebody in the Kings organization understands how it has been over the last 16 years, understands how the things that keep happening need to stop happening. Maybe Mike Brown has done his research and he's coming in knowing what needs to change. Maybe De'Aaron Fox now understands what he needs to do differently. Someone needs to change something. In reality, a lot of people need to change a lot of things. But myself and my guest here today, Chris Watkins, we both believe that this is the best team, at least on paper, to do that. So without further ado, here is my conversation and us trying to help the Kings learn some lessons or figure out what lessons need to be learned by this current Kings roster, coaching staff, and front office right here on Locked On Kings. I know I've said many times here on Locked On Kings that last season was my least favorite Kings season of this entire playoff drought. And we've seen the Kings look significantly worse than they looked last year. But with the consistent mistakes that last year's team would make, the ultimate letdown, them playing well below what we believe their talent level to be, last year was tough to get through. And I know I'm not alone in that. Chris Watkins from SacTown Sports 1140, also one of the hosts of the Return of the Roar podcast, is here with me on Locked On Kings today. And Chris, we're going to try and turn the negatives into a positive in some way, or at least a learning experience for the Sacramento Kings team. Because as you know, Chris, just because they've changed the personnel, just because they've changed coaches, just because they've upgraded their roster, doesn't mean that they can't still fall back into the bad habits that we've seen multiple teams fall into over the last 16 years.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of a tradition here to just, get new personnel in, get new players in here. And then it's like, all right, this is a new start, new era of Kings basketball. This time it's going to work. I promise. And it has not, never has.
It's really easy to kind of blame, or we maybe justify it to ourselves. We'll blame like Buddy Hield and Marvin Bagley and those guys for what happened last season, for chemistry being off. I know it's well known that De'Aaron Fox wasn't too happy coming into last season because of those two guys still being on the roster when they didn't want to be there. It's not that they hated each other, that they didn't get along, but they had different ideas of where their careers were going to go. And De'Aaron is obviously trying to make the most out of his opportunity here and not trying to waste what he believes are now the prime years of his career. But Chris, in your mind, how important is team chemistry to fixing some of the issues that we saw last year? If De'Aaron, Sabonis, Malik Monk, these guys come in and they're on the same page, do you think that has an immediate impact? We're talking game one impact.
Yeah, I don't know about game one impact, but I think chemistry really comes into play when things are at their worst or when things aren't going positive. It's when you look around and you're like, I really don't see the motivation for me personally to give it my all, and I possibly a little bit of me wishing, but you know, you would like to think that De'Aaron Fox now sees his former college teammate Malik Monk, a guy that notoriously De'Aaron cried in his locker room after they lost to North Carolina. Was speaking incredibly highly of his relationship with Bam Adebayo and Malik, and saying how they were brothers. He's got previous relationship with Kent Bazemore. I think it's no secret that maybe Buddy and Marvin last year were a hindrance to the team's chemistry in total. And I think this year it just feels like they have a better group of guys who all are working towards the same goal. And it's not really, I think Harrison Barnes is clearly in a contract year, and he's going to probably look out for his best interest at the end of the day. But for the most part, it's, and I think part of Harrison Barnes' success would be team success as well. But I think for the most part, everyone has the same common goal of, like, if we are going to be taken seriously individually and as a team, it's got to happen with all of us and everybody coming together to turn this thing around. Because it, as I said at the top, it's been too many times where people try and come in here and individually, I'm going to be the savior of this franchise. And I think this is the first time in a while where it's really felt like this is a collection of guys who all feel like they can do their part to raise the level of play.
I know we've talked a lot about, really since Iman Shumpert was traded away, this team lacking that leadership, that clear voice, that guy who's going to hold people accountable. And for years, we've looked to De'Aaron Fox, or maybe asked that from De'Aaron Fox. And at some point, you have to realize, okay, that's not the guy's personality, and we have to accept someone for who they are. De'Aaron Fox is not going to be that scream-at-you leader, although we've seen when he plays pissed off, not at his teammates, but at whatever it is, he typically plays when that chip on the shoulder comes out. We see another level of De'Aaron that we're hoping to see more consistently this year. But in your mind, Chris, is now the correct time, you think, to move away from the expectation? There's still plenty of expectation on Fox's shoulders to be the guy here, to be the leader, to score upwards of almost 30 points a game and start the season hot. And we're going to talk about his slow starts in a little bit. But can we move on from the De'Aaron has to be that vocal Draymond-esque green leader in addition to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Draymond thing is probably, I think there's only a special few amount of people in this world who can bring that kind of energy to a team. And that's kind of what makes Draymond so special where he is. But yeah, I mean, I think it really hasn't been completely fair, the amount of responsibility that we put on De'Aaron in that sense of asking this young 22, 23-year-old kid. And I don't mean any disrespect calling him a kid, but in a locker room full of Harrison Barnes and Rashawn Holmes, and it's mainly been a lot of guys who are older than him. And he, I think, has looked at it as, look, I'm going to do my part. I know I'm the best player. I'm going to lead by example, which is the kind of leader I think he is. But like you said, he's just not the kind of guy to raise his voice and really, demand a lot of his teammates. Not saying he doesn't expect everyone to be at his best or anything, but I just think, everyone's got different leadership styles. And, there is no proven track record of being a rah-rah, yelly, everyone, making sure everyone's doing the right thing. There's no guarantee that works. I would contest that a lot of the time that actually can be a deterrent. And, it's kind of, those are the kind of, like Draymond Green, the kind of guy that yells at you so much that it's just kind of like, I hate this guy, but I understand that he's got my best interest in mind. And, it's an even playing field with him. He'll yell at Steph Curry the same way he yells at Juan Toscano Anderson. Maybe not, but in theory. So yeah, I don't think De'Aaron has to be that vocal leader. I definitely hope that people look towards him for leadership, but I think that there's a difference between that and taking it upon himself to be like, everyone looks upon me to be the face of everybody.
That accountability, that vocal leader, do you think that's still going to be a question or an issue with this roster this year? Or is there someone that you have in mind that maybe the Kings have added this year, or even like maybe Davion Mitchell now in his second year, he speaks up a little bit more? Is there someone in your mind that says maybe he can take on that leadership role on this roster?
Yeah, that's interesting. I haven't really given it much thought. I think Davion has it in him. I think, obviously the stories of his work ethic are stuff of legends at this point. and with that, you would expect him to hold people to a certain level of accountability for sure. I'm very surprised that Harrison Barnes hasn't been we've heard Harrison Barnes step up as a locker room presence, as kind of an off the court leader for sure, but on the court, he doesn't seem to be that kind of vocal leader. Sabonis, I think, is somebody who for sure seems to have a level of grit to me that I don't know if he'll feel comfortable enough stepping up as a vocal leader on the floor, but to me, he seems like a kind of guy who definitely likes to talk to his teammates on the floor and make sure. I mean, to me, once he came to the team, it was something I definitely noticed that, just kind of checking in with guys, making sure, talking with people. Hey, what was I supposed to do there? Hey, what are you supposed to do there? Kind of thing. So I would look to him to maybe be a surprise candidate for that, but I don't really have anybody off the top of my head that I definitely see stepping up. Honestly, I think it would be Mike Brown.
Yeah.
I was incredibly impressed with his opening press conference to the media. I was ready to play for him after that. It seemed like he was almost like he was giving like a TV or a movie speech. It was almost too perfect. I think for sure at some point that might go on deaf ears, but I think he's a very inspirational guy, and I would definitely look to him to be a really large vocal presence for this team, as well as Jordi Fernandez, who we've seen definitely step up with the summer league roster. I think he's a very relatable guy, and somebody who, again, I would be ready to play for tomorrow.
Yeah, Coach Brown, I'm glad you brought him up too, because I was going to ask you if it had to be a player or if that's a role that Coach Brown can assume, and especially when it comes to the defensive side of the ball and accountability on that side of the floor. I believe, like, no disrespect to Luke Walton. Luke Walton was well liked by players. That was probably the biggest asset that he had. Mike Brown is also well liked by players, but Mike Brown also has the reputation. I mean, Steph Curry told us in his celebrity golf tournament when we did an interview with him for ABC 10, like, Mike is going to come in, he's going to hold you accountable. And I wonder how a Fox, a Sabonis, a Mitchell, anybody is going to react if Brown can grab him by the collar, for lack of a better term, and say, look, you need to step up on the defensive end. I understand you have 25 points right now, but we're down by 10 because we can't stop anybody. Like, I just wonder if Brown can be that guy, or if there needs to be an extension of Brown on the floor in form of a player.
Yeah, I think when you said that, instantly, the thing that came to my head was the way that Mike could do that is with playing time, rotations. I think that's the thing that gets to players the most, and that's the loudest that you can be in a player's ear, is by telling De'Aaron Fox, I don't care that you have 25 points right now. I need defense. I need a stop. Davion's coming in, and he's not coming out, and you're not coming in until I feel like, I can trust this lead or whatever with you on the floor. Whether or not he actually has the I don't know what word I want to use, but if he has the confidence in himself and the backing to do something like that, I think that to me would speak volumes. And playing time is always the thing that players that's been a big problem. That was not to take it back, but that was DeMarcus Cousins' issue, was there was nothing you could do about all of his chicanery because he was the only and best player on the court for the Kings to make them, a candidate to win. And so if you took him off the floor, you really weren't trying to win the game. And, with the level of depth that we have with this team, I think that there's a chance that you could really see, especially with somebody like Malik Monk, who's heavily offensive minded. If he's not going to play defense, he's not going to, have as big of a role as he might think he might, because Terrence Davis is somebody who's shown he also has the ability to score. And if he's willing to defend more than Malik, fans might not like it, and the checkbooks might not line up, but Terrence Davis will get preferential treatment over it.
You said earlier, and I really like what you said. You said you think chemistry helps the most during the dark times, the struggles, the hard times. And at some point, this team is going to get punched in the mouth. Even if they are significantly better, even if they start the season red hot, at some point they are going to face adversity. Maybe it's December or January when other teams, like playoff teams, have started to really hit their groove. Maybe the Kings just rattle off 3-4 losses in a row because something that was working isn't working anymore. Maybe they face injuries. It could be a lot of things. how the team responds to that, how poorly they've responded to that over the last 16 years has probably been one of the most consistent parts of this organization. That the team, you can see them. How many times have we seen them get off to good starts, or you see big moments? And like you look at last season, how the Kings started playing defensively. I remember that strip of Davion Mitchell on Donovan Mitchell in the home opener against the Utah Jazz. Crowds going nuts, going, holy crap, we have defense here. We're playing defense. That lasted all of a couple of weeks, and then we didn't talk about defense. Davion did his best, but we didn't talk about defense other than it sucked for the remainder of the entire season. Yeah. So when they do hit adversity, will they fold and fall back into their own kind of individual heroicism, or will they stick to it, stick to the plan, and climb their way back out of it and get back to where they were having success? That's a major area of this year. That's a major lesson over the last 15, 16 seasons that this team needs to learn.
Yeah, and I feel like I'm ready to get, bit in the behind for these takes, but like, I think this team is the one that's ready to kind of end that trend. I think that there's a lot of players who, I was talking about everyone caring about the team and not the individual, but on an individual level, there's so much that so many individual players have to prove this year. De'Aaron Fox is kind of not a put up or shut up year, but kind of like all right, we've seen the high end of De'Aaron Fox, and we've obviously, you made mention to how he started last season. Maybe how this could go if you're not the center of attention in an offense. Which one are you? I think that's a big question nationally. I think a lot of people are still confused on how good of a talent De'Aaron is, where he fits in the hierarchy of young stars. Is he up at a Ja Morant level? Obviously, that was a big comparison for a long time until last year. Ja just kind of overtook him. Right now, I think De'Aaron is kind of in that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander role or level, I should say. And I think, he can definitely get above that. And I would say at the moment, he's probably just a notch below it in terms of like national perspective. And you can go down the line. Obviously, Domantas Sabonis has a 2-year contract. It's kind of this season and next season for him to figure out if he wants to stay. I made mention to Harrison Barnes being in a contract year this year. He's turning 30. He's going to enter free agency into this year. He's more than likely going to get one last final shot at a big payday. I would look for him to sign a 4-year contract, probably taking him to 34. And then, the next phase of his career, he's probably going to be looking for big money. That means he needs to put up some good numbers and show that he's, not this middling player. Is he going to continue to be a starter in this league? Rashawn Holmes obviously has a lot of questions about his current role. I can go on and on and on, but I just think this year that there's a lot, even Mike Brown himself has a lot to prove. Monty McNair, you could keep on going. Right. There's just a lot for this team to prove, and that's a lot of weight, and for sure they can collapse under that weight mid-season if things aren't going well and they feel, oh man, like I think if they let it seep into their head, I think this is the end. Things can go very bad, but that's where they need to look on each other and be like, hey, like we saw how close they've been to making the 10 seed the past 2 seasons. And they've been garbage. They've played very, very poorly these past 2 seasons, and they have been within 2 to 3 games of making that play-in tournament. So if they can just rally and not let these, obviously 2 seasons ago, there was the 2 9-game win streak or losing streaks. There was a couple 4-game losing streaks and then a win and then another 4-game. If they can just, get rid of one of those or, just turn it around and have a better season, they're not far from success. And I think it's just kind of keeping the goal always at the top of mind.
This episode of Locked On Kings is brought to you by Built Bar. If you haven't tried Built Bar Puffs yet, you're depriving yourself of one of life's greatest joys. And guess what? There's a new flavor, a phenomenal flavor right now. They're delicious, indulgent cookie dough flavor covered in chocolate. Built has done it again. Let me introduce you to your new favorite, this cookie dough chunk puff. And by the way, their puffs are protein-infused marshmallows. They have a chewy texture, real cookie dough chunks, and of course, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. It's all the joys of eating cookie dough and all those sweets without the hassle of bad, high calories, things that are bad for you, things that ultimately don't help your body. The good news is These are good for you. We're talking only 160 calories, and they have a whopping 15 grams of protein. Whether you're trying these new puffs, you're trying their granola bars, you're trying just their classic Built bars, and there are many, many flavors. They're all good for you. They're all delicious, and believe it, you're going to have to hide it from your family members, your kids, your spouse, whatever, because everybody's going to want to snatch one of your Built bars, Built puffs, or Built granola bars away. Whatever you order, make sure you're saving money while doing it with our exclusive offer here. Use promo code LOCKED15, locked on 15, LOCKEDON15 at checkout for 15% off. Again, that's locked on 15 for 15% off at built.com. The slow starts for De'Aaron are so perplexing. And of course, that's going to be a major focal point come game one, whenever it is. Once the schedule drops, whoever the Kings are playing, the storyline in that game is going to be, how does De'Aaron Fox look? How does he start? And it is fair to say that he consistently gets off to slow starts now at this point of his career. But we've also seen the 2018 season, we've seen De'Aaron able to be effective right out of the gate, just like that team was effective right out of the gate when they got off to the strong start that year. And the reason why it's so perplexing is I go back and I look at the numbers. I remember watching him, and at no point did I think, wow, De'Aaron's not in shape, or wow, De'Aaron is he's slacking a little bit, or maybe he's not focused. Like, what do you see, Chris, when you see these slow starts from De'Aaron Fox? Is it anything in particular that like jumps out to you, like this is why De'Aaron is getting off to a slow start? Because honestly, I don't have an answer for it. And maybe he doesn't either. It's been a weird trend in his career, and you could make different excuses for it. He doesn't have any of those excuses now, but I've never looked at Fox on game one of the season and gone, wow, he's not ready.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I wish I had some grand answer for you. And, I'm sure, like you said, I'm sure De'Aaron wishes he had an answer too. I think it's just taken him a while every season, it feels like, to kind of find where he fits in. I think he doesn't naturally want to be this 28 per game scorer where he's carrying the team on his back, and, the team's success is directly linked to his success. But I think that's a situation he's found himself in. I think he would like to not necessarily defer and be, people have called him, a number two, or, whatever, a Robin, a beta. I don't necessarily subscribe to that. I just think he's somebody who looks to get all of his teammates involved and would much rather win with a collective than individually by himself. And at the end of the day, I just think that a lot of the time his teammates have kind of let him down, and he's kind of had to eventually revert to superstar Fox, which we have seen him do. And that's the interest to me. That's the positive of it all, is every single season he has been able to find it within himself to bring that out. It hasn't been an entire season of just dragging his feet and trying to figure out what's wrong. It's always been, just De'Aaron kind of turning it on late in the year. And I think obviously last year, Tyrese Halliburton, having the ball in his hands so much kind of affected the way De'Aaron played, and we saw him have a major boost the second half of the season. I think this year we're not going to see that issue. I think the ability for him to play off of Domas is going to be huge. He's not going to have a massive burden on him. Domas is going to create offense for him, which is not something anybody has done for him. And I think, it's almost slump proof to have Domas. If Domas plays well, De'Aaron's going to play well. I think it's just going to kind of be as simple as that. But that's the thing, is if for whatever reason Sabonis gets injured or something, or doesn't have as good of a start as we think he might have, and De'Aaron has to revert back to that superstar mode, it'll to me, that'll be interesting to see team success wise how it happens, or if it happens.
Maybe the answer is, Chris, he needs to come in with the expectation that he has to grab the bull by the horns. He has to come in ready to attack, whether he's trying to prove it to himself, prove it to naysayers, whatever he needs to motivate himself to approach game one like it's a playoff series and he needs to be the guy. I think that's the mindset that he needs to have, except the difference I see this year compared to years past is Fox had to be a 26, 27 points per game scorer for the Kings to have any chance consistently last year. This season, if Fox is scoring 27 points a game, this Kings team should be winning. Like, they should be winning. They have enough talent on this roster to pick up the rest of the scoring load if Fox is doing that on a nightly basis. But if Fox does have a bad night, which is going to happen, it's impossible to expect De'Aaron to be good all 82 games. Hopefully he plays all 82 games. Let's just start there. On a night where Fox only scores 20, there's enough talent on this roster now to pick him up. And I don't want him to rely on that necessarily, but I also don't blame him at all for having a sense of relief with that going into the game, going, I can play fine tonight or good tonight, and we still have a chance.
Yeah, I think that to me is going to be I think that's probably what's honestly going to happen a lot this year. I think we might view it as like a statistical downgrade, but I see a lot of potential like 20-10 games for De'Aaron this year. Maybe not averaging 28 a game, but I would be perfectly fine. Me and Brendan Nunez in an unreleased podcast that I don't think the world will ever see or hear went down the list of like who we think the top scorers will be. And, you know, obviously you have De'Aaron and Sabonis at 1 and 2. But Harrison Barnes, as mentioned, contract year, probably going to get somewhere from 16 to 18 points a game. Kevin Huerter has consistently, in a pretty reduced role in Atlanta, always averaged at least 12 points a game. You'd imagine he'll be anywhere from 12. Maybe, honestly, me and Brendan talked about it in this podcast, but he could be a most improved player of the year candidate, going from 12 to 16, maybe even 18 points a game. He's going to have such an increased role in this offense that I think people are going to be shocked with how good Kevin Huerter is. Malik Monk coming off the bench, probably going to give you 10 to 12 points a game. What is Keegan Murray going to be this season? We don't know. The bigger point is that's 5 or 6 guys who can give you over 10 points a game. I don't think the Kings have had that since their glory years.
And I know you're not disrespecting him too, but this is a big question mark. Davion Mitchell, the way he ended offensively last season, is that the kind of guy that he can be both on the floor with Fox and when he is taking over the point guard roles when Fox needs a breather?
Absolutely. Yeah. I just don't even consider Davion's offense as something that's consistent enough to try and project. I mean, another big thing with me and Dave, I just, you know, I think this is a big year for Davion. I'm very unclear on what his future is going to be. I think, you know, he obviously his work ethic is out of control. It will not, you know, if he doesn't succeed in the NBA, it will not be because he did not put in the effort. Yeah. To me, it's just kind of a cap of like, we saw who he was last year. He's put in a ton of work on his jump shot, supposedly, but the thing is, how much better will it make him? Will all the work in the world be able to kind of counterbalance the fact that he's a 6-foot point guard who's, you know, doesn't have a long wingspan and kind of, you know, is pretty limited offensively? What more can he be with a lot of work? And, you know, it's kind of an interesting experiment that we're going to see played out here in Sacramento of just like, how far can hard work get you, really? Because Davion is again just like an incredible worker, but you know, in terms of on the court results, it wasn't there for a majority of last year, and then it kind of didn't come until he had a massive usage percentage at the end of the year, and you know, was able to really get his numbers. But how will he do in an offense where, you know, I just listed off 5 guys who are going to be primary scoring options over him? Where will he fit in? How will he fit in? His playmaking isn't really a big part of his game. It might have to be with that amount of other scorers on the court.
His 3-point shooting and what he looks like in training camp are going to be major things for us to follow. And I'm sure we'll revisit and talk about those once training camp comes around in September and in preseason in early October. Chris, we'll end with this. You've brought up Harrison Barnes a couple of times, and I think you've hit the nail on the head with him. The contract year, typically you see players in a contract year step up their game a little bit because they know every little bit counts towards the final dollar amount that they're going to get. And you're 100% right. This is the last major big contract that Harrison is going to receive. A debate here on Locked On Kings, a debate among Sacramento media, and I know you've heard it or been a part of it, is asset management, proper asset management. And there's a very good chance that the Kings could lose Harrison Barnes in free agency for nothing, which it's very difficult for the Kings to replace a player as good as Harrison Barnes without trading him. At the same time, though, the Sacramento Kings are trying to get better. Trading Harrison Barnes when basically you need a Harrison Barnes. You're looking for a younger, better contract Harrison Barnes, essentially, by trading Harrison away. You're not going to get that. I don't know who that guy is out there. Yeah. Where do you fall on this line of Harrison is really important to this team. He needs to be here. The Kings need him. He also needs to be better because he was dreadful defensively last season, as was the entire team. And I think he knows that. But the Kings need him versus the Kings can't afford to lose their starting three for nothing in free agency. Where are you at with that teeter-totter right now?
Yeah, it's definitely a very tough balancing act. I compare it to last year. There was the need to get Buddy Hield off of the roster completely. You had to trade him. But at the same time, especially with the way that it ended up happening with losing Buddy and Tyrese at the same time, you lose all your shooting, all of your shooting. And so at that point, it's kind of like, all right, if you're going to trade Buddy, you kind of need to trade for somebody else who can also shoot and defend and X, Y, and Z. So I find myself in the same conundrum with Harrison Barnes, where, as you laid out, you do need an upgrade at the Harrison Barnes position. Ideally, I think Harrison Barnes is a completely fine NBA player. I think he's like the definition of like a starter, but you can do better. You can absolutely do worse. I compare him all the time. I'm a Minnesota Vikings fan. I compare him to Kirk Cousins every day of the week. I mean, it's just, you can, he's at that mid-level where you see the Paul Georges, you obviously see the Giannis's, the LeBrons, all these guys where you're like, I know I can get better out of this position, but also is getting Kelly Oubre for $10 million cheaper really a better option in terms of like, you don't get the same level of consistency and maybe, not the same level of professionalism. I'm really, as you can tell, I don't really fall on a side. I don't believe that Keegan Murray can play the three. I just don't think he has the foot speed defensively to do it. And I don't really think he's there quite yet. I would be okay with, you mentioned just trying to find a younger, cheaper option that is good. I personally, and I'm probably going to get killed for this, I wouldn't mind seeing someone like Tobias Harris come in, where I think Tobias is at worst at Harrison Barnes's level, if not a little better. Obviously, he's compensated on another level of Harrison Barnes. I think he makes like $35 or $36 million, where Harrison makes 20, or he might even be down at like 18 this season.
Yep.
But I think that the skill upgrade that you get with Tobias is a better ball handler. He's just longer and taller than Harrison is. He's a 6'9" guy. He's been able to, be on winning teams before in the past. I think somewhere like that might be the better route to go. But to your point, I kind of don't see a clear answer. I mean, in terms of what they will actually do, if you trade Harrison Barnes at the trade deadline for a first round pick, and that's kind of just selling him off, I don't love that. I think that's probably the maximum amount of value that you can get for him is a mid to late first round pick. If you're looking to get a player, I just don't see how that works unless you're going to package Harrison and Davion Mitchell for, and maybe even a first, and then just get a significant upgrade for player to be named later. There's always players that are popping up, disgruntled and stuff like that. If they could, I don't even have anyone off the top of my head, but if they can kind of pull off a trade like that, I think that would be the most ideal. But you're going to have to give up something in order to get an upgrade there 100%. And I also don't think that if they let Harrison walk in free agency, I have no idea what the answer would be at that point.
It's a risk no matter what Monty McNair does, but I think McNair has proven over the last few years that he will not make a move for the sake of making a move. He will be patient, sometimes too patient, until the right move in his mind is there. So we'll have to wait and see with that. Just one of a million storylines to follow with this upcoming season. Chris, of course, you and Frankie Cardicelli will be all over that on Return of the Roar. And Chris, we're going to do it again. Last year, right before the season started, we did mild, hot, and spicy takes. Most of my takes I ended up using in a compilation that made me look like an absolute idiot, but we had a lot of fun with it. We're doing it again. Yourself and Frankie, maybe even Brendan. We might get Brendan in on this as well. We're going to all get together and we're going to throw some major takes out about this season because it has the potential to be the best in a long, long time. And it also has a potential to hurt us more than we've ever been hurt.
Yep.
So let's
purge.
do it.
Let's purge, man. Let's get it all out. There's one night to do it, and we'll just get it out, and we can't be held accountable for any of those things. I love it.
Maybe a little alcohol will be involved. We'll have to wait.
Just
and see,
a little bit.
Chris, your phenomenal, man. Thank you so much for doing this. Keep up the excellent work that you do, and we'll chat again very soon. We're almost there, kind of, not really, but still, we're closer at least.
Appreciate you, Mateo.
Big thank you to Chris for joining me. I look forward to having him and Frankie back on for another one of those mild, spicy, and hot take podcasts that last year made me look like an idiot. This year, it might do it again. Regardless, it's a fun episode to do. Brings in the over expectations, the excitement level for the season. We'll probably do that in end of September, early October time, around the start of the preseason. So if you want to share your thoughts and weigh in on the conversation that we had about the lessons that need to be learned, maybe we forgot about a couple lessons, or you want to weigh in on Davion Mitchell and his offensive ability, Harrison Barnes on his contract year, De'Aaron Fox's slow starts, Mike Brown is the guy that's going to hold this roster accountable. So much for you to weigh in on. Please do so. You can reach me on Twitter at MattGeorgeSack. You can email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com, or leave your thoughts in the YouTube comment section down below. Thank you so much for your support. Can't wait to have you join me on the next episode of Locked On Kings. Until then, my name is Matt George. You have been listening to the Locked On Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.